What is it with guys? Maybe it's just me, but it seems that any time I want to exercise a little practical scientific inquiry into, I don't know, anything that to my mind seems a little sketchy, the guys at work totally give me a hard time. Like, I'm what? Not capable, not supposed to ask, be curious? Damn it, it's just so annoying. Like, look, take 99% of the so-called supernatural stuff on YouTube. Dorky teenage boys with some crap After Effects, a few pieces of nylon fishing twine, and some bullshit story. I mean, seriously. I know, most of it is total crap. But what about that other 1%? Or even 0.5%? Even that adds up to a hell of a lot of YouTube posts. Yeah, and I know that old copycat theory has a lot to answer for. You know, one guy sees a spaceship and suddenly everyone is seeing spaceships. They all look like 1950 hubcaps because it's the 1950s. Or one scary indie game introduces the idea of seeing spooky shit through your smartphone. And suddenly every scary indie game is seeing spooky shit through your smartphones. Yeah. Copying, ripping off others' ideas, it's human nature, but that pisses me off too. It's tough enough being a female in gaming. You know, you just get used to having a big hairy hand on your gun trigger, along with your abnormally large biceps, and all your grunts and huffing and puffing are big.
Call me cynical, if you must, but I never blindly believed the fables and fairy stories the other kids seemed to lap up. Instead, I was the one who pulled Santa Claus's beard off in the shopping mall and whispered to the next kid in the
Big and butch, either that, or you're some kind of Lara Croft clone with massive boobs. Yeah, I know, they reduced them, but they still dwarf most women I know.
Oh, I heard him.
Please help me.
He's right there. Still. Lest he take you too.
Tick-tock.
Please help me.
Listen to me, young'un, and take heed you listen careful like. For I, Jasper Crowd, am done. Dusted, beggared, broken and cursed. And well I deserve it. Mr. Dickens was right when he said, we forge the chains in life we wear. Oh yes, indeed we do. Doom spoke that night, and I had not the heart to deny him. I only know I lost myself, such was my terror, and before I could recover my wits, I had given him the keys, all of them, the keys to every room in the place, and begged and pleaded that he take the children and spare my wretched soul. So he did. But the wretch he spared was to become more wretched a soul racked with guilt than any soul damned to join him and his hellish band.
Madness. 'Tis all of it a raving madness. That man places his trust in an almighty God, religion, faith, and the sullied hands of priests. Bah! For I, Cuthbert Povey, who had no belief in God, had surely just witnessed the devil. With its back to the window stood a heinous figure, rising 7 feet in height, perhaps more, looming over a cowering Mr. Crowd. My hands, damp with terror, tightened around the rough wooden crucifix, as it became clear what action I must take, for I knew now, this moment, was a test. I would stand and confront the beast, claiming victory in the Lord's name, seeking protection in the power of the Lord God Almighty and the symbol of life everlasting, the crucifix. I would drive this demon back to hell, and victory and forgiveness would be mine. But alas, the moment passed. By morning, the children were gone.
Many mean well, but alas, cannot always be trusted, for this pitiless blackness casts strange shadows on the soul.
Grimhaven. It was not my choice, and this was not the course I would set for my life, nor the story I would have written had I held a pen. But alas, I am not a writer, merely the final chapter of a tale written generations before, of famine, fishermen, navigators, gold diggers, and death. A story which ends with myself, Edward, 15 years old and far from my Norwegian homeland, penniless and stranded, like a sea trout in a net, entangled by a force of which I have no understanding. For the one who casts this net reeks of horror, of fear, and sinks my stomach to the floor whenever I hear his approach. It is like being in a hypnotist's trance, for I can think of no happy thoughts to buoy my spirit, but am overcome by the ceaseless ticking of his timepieces, pocket watches of all descriptions. In this place, between the realms of darkness, there is no learning, no beauty, no art, except whatever thoughts and images I can conjure in my mind. For art has always been my release. It seems my yearning for peace and quiet within the orphanage walls, so that I may sit and draw unhindered, was duly noted by God, with no mean measure of annoyance. So, in his wisdom, he placed me here, within the nothing world. Perhaps this is penance. Perhaps I am paying for the sins of my forebears, for there are Vikings in my line, and through lineage, blood on my hands. Am I a sacrificial child, upon whose shoulders God has placed the sins of the fathers? I feel as one does on a summer's day, when as a small child, one would stand in the center of a grassy meadow and arms outstretched spin around and around and around, until finally one would stop, but the world would spin on and on, as if riding a nightmarish carousel. Except in this dream, it is not summer. The sky lays grey and threatening above, and as the wind flays my body, and all about me spins, I am standing on a hillock and observing a figure wave their arms and call to me from the next rise. And though I cannot hear a sound, I know they are begging me for help. Yet I can move not a muscle to assist them. I am powerless, a silent scream of despair caught in my throat, rendering me wide-eyed and gasping, like the sea trout in the net. So we sailed for America, my brother Sven with jaw set in grim determination, and I clinging to his shadow, both fleeing the pain of my mother's abandonment and the shame of my father's imprisonment, for the dark angels of death hounded him with single-minded intent. No.
It seems I've been here forever, sinking in this swampy blackness. I felt like that at the orphanage too, as if I'd been there forever. I don't remember anything except always being the eldest, the responsible one, and having my hair tugged, my ears pulled by matron when any of the small ones were naughty. It was always my fault. I'm tired, so tired. I'd sleep tired and wake tired, and the chores, they just went on and on, like a baby's whining. Matron says I'm a thief and a liar, and that I'll burn in hell forever for my sins. Though it's not the fire, but the chill that aches my bones, and this nothing place so cold. I did steal the pretty dancing lady from matron's room. But I never fessed, even after the 13 swats with the hickory stick. I didn't mean to, truly I didn't. But she was so beautiful, spinning round and round on one shapely leg while the music box sparkled. I think the devil tapped my shoulder and made me take it. Indeed I do. Matron never found the pretty dancer. I made sure of that. I hid her quite away, though once I showed Dorothy, but made her swear on her ma's grave not to tell. Dear Dorothy, she was like a baby sister. I miss her so. And the pretty dancer, so cold. I'm so tired. Such a pretty dancer.
John hears. They mock me, idiot mute, but John hears. John's mind is sharp, thoughts razor sharp and cutting, quick too. Thoughts waterfall, tumble from mind. But John's voice wounded, like bird that cannot fly. Words break, shatter as wedded wine glass when John speaks. No sense, nonsense. They tease, torment me. John shunned, lonely boy John. They laugh. John angry, sad, confused. For words in head become different to words from John's mouth. Mouth words moaning, slurring. They frighten little children, crying. John ashamed. So John quiet. But John hears more than they. Too much noise deafens the truth all about them. They all be lame ducks mired in a swamp of wickedness, deaf and blind. Not John. For John sees and hears everything. Mr. Crowd, good man, and Charlie too, good kind boy. Blessings to them who taught John to read. Books speak to John when others will not. Nursery blocks speak when John cannot. Use the blocks, spell the word John. Soon others forget that John can speak. Others forget that John hears all, sees all, and remembers all. Wickedness, depravity, cook harlot, cook vanity, selfish thieving madam. John, allay, peel potatoes, reet, foolish lout, useless Jew boy. No wonder no one wants you, you good-for-nothing idiot boy. Cook, admiring her sordid reflection in the cutlery, crawled to the girls prettier than...
I have tried to fit the pieces together in my mind.
What's in the box? Incy spider crawled up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out.
Matron of Grimhaven Orphanage, yes, I was. But that was many years ago. At the risk of sounding unkind, I must say, it was never my intent in life to bear responsibility for an orphanage, and certainly not one of such tragic notoriety as Grimhaven. No, that plan was surely the Lord's, and the part I played simply the path he set before me. For my heart's desires were like so many of the gentler sex, and comprised of a loving husband, a home, children of one's own. Unfulfilled dreams the lot. Please do not mistake me as a heartless woman, for Grimhaven was oft a happy place, and the children joyful and willful. But there hung about the buildings a pall of melancholy that frequently chilled my bones, and I was not the only one to note this strangeness, for I know for a fact it played in our caretaker's mind. Oh yes, this was long before the taking of the children, the tragedy. I would prefer not to discuss those events for my own peace of mind, for I am a sensitive woman who has lived with this sadness for too many years, and the distress lingers still in my heart. You know, the whole saga sent Mr. Crode, our caretaker, quite mad, dear man. He lived alone in Grimhaven for years after everyone else had long departed. But enough of this, for regret does little to ease the soul. However, I am willing to recall earlier times and more wholesome memories. Mind, that is not to say all events that took place were wholesome, but I fear I am running ahead with my prattle. How I became burdened with the responsibility and care of Grimhaven and those who sheltered within its walls is of little consequence. Suffice to say, I had at one time been a governess and engaged to be married to a young man who did not place the same importance on his word and character as he did on his future prospects. I am surely grateful I discovered his deceit in a timely manner before we were wed, for I was a woman of modest means and good heart, unlike the wealthy young miss whom he eventually married. I heard they were very unhappy together for many, many years. At that time, my employer was a member of Grimhaven's Board of Trustees, and it was his kindness and sympathy towards my plight which resulted in my future being secured through the board's offering me the position of matron. A position of care and responsibility I bore for 23 years. To my mind, the orphans were rather like apples. Some sweet and wholesome, some thick-skinned with a bitter taste, and then there were those who had only a spot or two of rot that needed rooting out with a sharp paring knife to make them wholly good. And lastly, the other kind, thankfully rare, but by far the most distasteful of all. Do you follow my meaning? No? Well, let me explain, dear. For I am speaking of the apple that is plucked from the tree, ripe and sparkling. The apple that takes pride of place in the fruit bowl for its scent, color, and beauty of God's design. But when cut with a knife, its true core is exposed. A core that is brown, rotten through, and infested with writhing maggots. Oh yes, we had an orphan such as I have just described. An evil boy. And I have little doubt that he was in some way to blame for the terrible events that took place, though I know not how. 'Tis true the devil makes work for idle hands, and I instructed my staff to ensure there was little opportunity for such. Every morning before lessons the girls would perform domestic duties, whilst the boys drew water from the well and swept the yard. After a simple but wholesome breaking of the fast, lessons were held until lunch, after which the children worked out in the orchard or upstairs in the sewing and carpentry rooms, the results of their toil being sold to contribute to their charitable upkeep. Prayers were conducted morning and night, and 4 times on the Sabbath day, in between 2 sermons preached under the wandering eyes of Pastor Cuthbert Povey, a bow-legged inferior example of a man, for whom I had little time or respect, save that he did appear genuinely kind to the children. However, over time it became abundantly clear to me that his ministrations towards some members of staff were rather more familiar than godly, and combined with an alarming decrease in our cellared bottles of communion wine, I was little sorry to be rid of him. Odd, though, that he should leave behind his priestly attire on departing. The constabulary suspected foul play on his part, but I doubt he would have had the wits or capability to carry out such a plan, for he appeared weak and spineless, a self-serving fellow to my memory. I noted, too, that his garments were not all Cuthbert Povey left behind. Marguerite, the cook, the object of his dalliance, though not the only one, was also discarded, and in a dreadful state, too. Her reputation, such that it was in tatters, and as I recall, she moved away to her sister's out east for a good 9 months after Povey's departure. Foolish girl. Oh, she was capable enough in the kitchen, but prone to the most hysterical outbursts, and without a maternal bone in her body. She was intolerant of the children, more especially the girls, and at times cruel. Marguerite would repeatedly confiscate Dorothy's doll. What was it named? Gloria, that's it. The wee girl adored it. A gift from her late mother, as I recall. Where was I? Ah, yes. Marguerite would place the doll high out of Dorothy's reach, though the child had done no wrong. It was a heartless trick, and one I chastised her for on many occasions. Marguerite, with cruel, hard crow's eyes, and likewise a penchant for glittering objects. I blame her for the disappearance of my beautiful music box, Parisian, you know, with a dancing ballerina and very exotic. I would swear on the Holy Bible that she was the one who took it, if only the Lord would permit me to do so. Her confidant was Hattie, one of the older girls, and a cunning little light-fingered miss, too. With a forked tongue like a lizard, her lies were boundless, so perhaps it was her. But no, it is not fair of me to accuse one of the unfortunate taken ones of such a mischief. I am certain it was Marguerite. But the boy, the evil child to whom I referred earlier, Rupert Murdoch. He came to us as a 5-year-old, his parents and baby sister having succumbed to typhoid in the city. It was a miracle the child survived it all, for his hair and clothes were matted with filth and infested with vermin. He appeared quite steady and placid of nature, an extraordinarily pretty child, as I recall, and wholly undisturbed by the loss of his loved ones. I never heard him ask for any of them, not ever. Like the shiny apple that he was, Rupert proved an exceptionally gifted child, with a sharp intellect who excelled at his lessons. However, by the time he was 16, the same year as the tragedy, Rupert had grown into a young man with some oddly disturbing ways. He warmed to no one and kept solely to his own company, save that of any spiders he found, for he delighted in collecting the loathsome things and frightening the younger children with them. Like Marguerite, Rupert harbored a cruel streak, and would lock anyone who crossed him in the cellar without remorse. Timepieces, too. The boy would thieve them whenever the opportunity presented itself. Clocks of all shapes.
Do you really want to open that door? What's in the box? Incy Wincy Spider crawled up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Help me, for he holds me tighter than the others.
Help me.